What is up, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the show. Today, we are going to talk about just the system in general, the constant contradictory statements made, and just to revisit the hierarchy of how things actually work. Remember, this is essentially a puppet show. This is essentially a movie. The system, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, this is created and facilitated in a way that it is a big fat movie. That is simply it. And when you can remove bias, when you can remove emotion and worldview out of the way, and you can just look at the data points as what they are, then you can start to piece together different scenarios. And the more that the scenario is validated, just like the more that a trend is validated and supported, then we start to create a theory or a thesis. And the more that is true, then we can start to create a system and an entire framework. That is how successful trading is done. That is the deep structure to many things. And it is the deep structure to what we're seeing unraveling in front of us right now. So we're going to start all the way at the beginning here, and we're going to move through quite a few topics. Now, my goal with the channel here moving forward is to slow down with the creation of content and to really hone in on the core points of the conversation and to turn it into a conversation and an idea and a theory, I guess, more so than to just state data. Up until this point, we've done just a lot of data gathering and presenting the data to you. I would like to take that a step further and present it in a slightly different way so that hopefully you get more value out of that. If you like that, go ahead and click the thumbs up button right now. Let's dive into it. First off, we right now are waiting on JP Morgan and Wells Fargo to report their earnings. It is literally going to happen. So it'll already have happened after you are watching this video and after you are seeing this video. Okay. Next thing I wanted to quickly cover. Oh yeah, Uber just filed for IPO, and that came across my stream as well. So those two things are going on. Now let's dive into it. I want to talk about the confliction of information. You see this happening everywhere. And the issue right now is that there's so much data, there's so much information out there that people, I think, are just overwhelmed and they don't want to elevate to the next level. They think it's too much information and it's too much data. Now, I can prove that wrong really quick. If you're a boomer in your, what age range is that? Who cares, actually? The categorization is just obnoxious at this point. If you're older and you weren't born and raised on technology and iPads and internet, then your ability to keep up with news is way slower. It's not just because your age. I think that's a soft excuse. It's because many things, but it's mostly because you don't think you can. And it's mostly because of what you're used to. Now, look at a kid who's been kind of born and raised. Look at my era. I'm 33 years old. I'm in that in between, seeing the industrial revolution kind of end and the internet age start. I got to see the death of one way of living and the start of an entirely new generational way of living, right? I can plug into both sides. I can plug into this is too much, I can't keep up, and I can plug into this isn't that much, and I can keep up. And so I think that's a very good point to understand, is that a lot of that is really just based on what we want. And most people feel like they're slipping out of control and they can't keep up, so therefore they are. Okay, simply put. So right now, we're definitely facing that, and there's so much noise, there's so much volume out there that it makes it worse, because what do I tune into? And there's all these things fighting for my attention, and maybe we get triggered today on Facebook because politics, tomorrow we're triggered on Twitter. Before you know it, nothing's getting done. We're not getting better and growing as an individual, we're just spending our time rolling around in the mud. That's the goal, my friends. Distraction, the sleight of hand, okay, the oldest trick in the book. The contradiction, let's talk about it. It happens on both parties. And they do it equally. Okay, so first off, at a high level, there is the IMF and the Fed and BIS, and they control everything that, well, the BIS and the IMF control everything that the Fed then can say and adopt, rather. And then all the central banks, they create the policy that all of them, coincidentally, all just kind of adopt over time. So they kind of roll out the framework and foundation that everyone else really operates off of. And they're constantly up against or battling at the Fed level the presidents of different countries. This is done on purpose. This is done to create friction. This is done to make the president look like he's trying to stand up for the people of his country, and then the federal monetary policy make it as presented in a way that they're the bad guy, but then they play the good guy sometimes. A lot of this just is a good cop, bad cop game. And so let's look at some of this. I'll just point out a few of the breadcrumbs. First off, we have IMF warns nations to limit public debt Who was this? The IMF rejected prominent calls to rethink fiscal policy across the world on Wednesday, saying that if countries wanted to run much higher levels of public debt, they risked facing severe difficulties in financing their borrowing. AKA, they're not going to keep financing you if you keep doing stupid shit. Okay, this was Vidor Gaspar, director of IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, April 10th. Now, at the top, you can see just some of the hypocrisy just in that. Okay, IMF warns recent volatility could just be tip of the iceberg. Corporate America is failing to invest. Lagarde urges resolution to trade disputes to stem synchronized slowdown. Now, let's look at the other side of that. Trump is attacking the Fed. He's constantly attacking Powell. We have Larry Kudlow coming on national television and saying, hey, we should walk back the rate hikes that were presented and rolled out in December. And we have Trump constantly tweeting saying that the Fed is screwing up his GDP numbers and that they're the bad guy. And this is actually a pretty triggering topic. This, should a president step into monetary policy? It's actually a hilarious conversation. Read some of this stuff, because what it actually says is it says that, one, it assumes that the Fed is part of the government. I don't know why. It never was. It was created in 1913. Okay, let's take a trip back to memory lane. It was created in 1913, and it is a sole entity run by bankers. It has sole discretion to do what it wants. Actually, the IMF does as well. There was a UN sanction that was passed at one point that allows them veto rights to basically do what they want with the money system. So they are a separate entity that's running all by themselves. And this is part of the game, right? So that they can make these pieces and kind of present it in us versus them scenario to get people to what? Divide and take sides. But essentially, the argument is lost from the very beginning because it assumes that the Fed is somehow part of the government. And then it tries to make this argument that the president should not have a say in what the monetary policy is. Considering they're two separate entities, it's fine that he brings these things up. Whether they decide to listen to him or not is entirely up to them, because they're their own business. They are their own sovereign entity in the United States, in every country that they're in. Remember, there's only 3 countries now on the entire planet that don't have centralized banking. There's a reason for that, okay? That's been something that's been worked on for the last 100 years. This is just part of the game. You don't need to take sides because it doesn't really matter. And all that does is then it forces you to have to validate yourself whenever this conversation is brought up. So you can just choose to not pick a side on this because it doesn't matter anyways. It's two sides of the same coin. And so we have this side now able to play the part of, well, wait a second, slow down, make sure you're doing this smart. And then we have the individual banks that come out and make positions as well and make conversation around these things as well, which is the next place we need to go with this. Goldman Sachs says chance of recession is now just 10%. Funny how that changed so quick. April 10th. Wasn't I just talking in a Jerome Powell video within the last 30 days how things are looking rough? Yield curve inversion, all this other data, right? And sometimes it becomes so much to remember all the data points, which that's why I'm documenting these videos like I do, is because I don't want to have to remember all these talking points, to be honest with you. It's too much data, and why hold on to that? And I have a long ass document that actually keeps track of all this, the timeline of it. Anyways, maybe at one point I'll share that. I've been working on it since I started in November. It's fascinating actually, and long, very, very long. Okay, the Federal Reserve's abrupt policy pivot has eased financial conditions and reduced the odds of a recession to just 10% over the next 4 quarters from 20% at the end of the 4th quarter, said Goldman Sachs economist. Now, this doesn't even make sense because quarter to quarter, yeah, you can make some big changes, but you're not seeing that much change happening on the ground. So that's how you know this is fluff. So you know this is fluff, and how you can validate this is, okay, well, let me just go look at the jobs. Let me go look at the street. Let me go see how many people are defaulting. What's the size of personal debt? And those numbers are going up. Mortgage rates are locked in at what, 4.4% or 4%? But yet there's nobody buying houses. So you're seeing very small pockets of growth throughout the United States in the housing market, but there's all these other indicators. Like unemployment rate, I don't think is that great of an indicator because it requires somebody to actually go down and file for unemployment, and how many people don't do that. And then they're not really equating and accounting for the huge demographic that just make their money off the internet and are currently unemployed, and I put that in air quotes, but they're making making money, okay? So I think a lot of the census data has been quite skewed since at least 2016, when people really started taking it serious. Look at how many people make a full-time income off of YouTube, etc. So a lot of that comes through on the tax data, not the consensus side. So a lot of that comes through on the tax side and not the consensus data. But my point is that you can look at the ground of America and see that even though the numbers that they're presenting look good and these odds that they're presenting look good, there's other supporting information that says it's bad. The foreclosure rate hasn't really gone down. People's personal debt has gone up. People aren't buying houses, but also too, the stock market is propped up by corporate buyback programs and stock buyback programs. The street is still selling. FANG stocks are getting sold at the same rate they've always been sold at. People, solo investors are selling out and corporations are buying that up. Those are all indicators that it's not okay. But yet, you have people like this saying it is, and they're vested to do this. They're vested to say everything's okay because the dollar is propped up on belief. It's propped up on your trust in it and your perceived value in it, right? Now, I wanted to jump into the the face-off with CEOs in Congress that happened on the 10-year anniversary of the last economic recession. But I want to touch on one thing first. I was supposed to before I jumped into the Goldman story. As you know, and this is definitely, I've got an emotional stake in this next piece here. Julian Assange got picked up the other day. The Ecuadorian embassy talked about it a week ago, and then, well, a news piece came out. The Ecuadorian embassy denied it was going to happen, and then yesterday, the UK secret police basically walked out Julian Assange from the embassy, which is breaking UN law, international law, a gazillion different laws. But they walked him out and arrested him, and now they're talking about where he's going to go and what's going to happen to him. I think this marks a bad day, a sad day for freedom of speech, because he single-handedly was the one guy holding the people accountable that are doing some of the shadiest stuff. We're talking about governments, we're talking about presidential candidates, we're talking about bankers, we're talking about all the people that are kind of running the show that don't want a guy like this around. Now, I do think it's interesting that they didn't just take this guy out at some point, and he did last 10 years. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next. Will tell you whose side he's playing on. That's the best way I can put it. But hey, coincident, the IMF approves a $4.2 billion loan for Ecuador right on time the next morning after Assange was picked up. So this should be direct evidence of to support the theory that there are backdoor deals worked out, and that a lot of times what the UN policy and UN law does not mean countries will play that way. And there's a whole set of rules and a whole game that's being played that most people don't think is even possible or exists. See, most people, they're operating from the standpoint that everything is fair and just and honest, and we are living in the truest, purest sense of democracy in the United States that was presented in the Constitution, and we're not. And that's okay. You got to stop pulling the wool over your eyes, because then you're playing in a realm of reality that doesn't exist. Now, I'm not saying that means go rob and pillage. That's not what that means. It just means face and accept the reality that you're in, and it always comes back down to making a plan and working that plan, okay? So now let's pivot into, God, I got a New York Post article up. I just wanted to show you the sensationalism of this, which supports the line of thinking that this was just grandstanding. And if you watch the actual show, let's call it, you'll see that it was just glorified grandstanding. So the Democrats wanted to look good because they got this whole Russiagate thing now that was 2 years of wasted time, money, and witch huntism that then essentially just came crashing down with the Mueller report. True or not, who cares? I don't have a position on that, okay? So don't think I do. But from a basic psychology standpoint, of course, they're going to react, and they're going to try and now stack their deck in a good way. They call this meeting 10-year anniversary of the global economic crisis, and they try to play hardball, which you can tell that they didn't, and it was done on purpose. But look at how they sensationalize this. Lawmakers grill Wall Street bigwigs over risks to U.S. economy. Now let's get rid of that garbage. ABC News, not any better, but they had more information in this piece. CEOs of big banks face off with House Democrats. So see, who's the hero in this? The Democrats. Who's the bad guys? Big bad wolf is the bankers. And they do this with imagery too. And you notice this subliminally. You notice this subconsciously. You catch on to this when they want to frame a news piece as somebody as a bad guy, they use the worst photo they can find. And when they want to frame somebody as a good guy or that he's a hero, they find the best photo that they can find. Somebody smiling, somebody helping, reaching down to help other people, living the life shown in a positive way. They'll even use different filters to show the emotion through this. And then this is hitting you through your news feed and triggering a reaction in you. Make sense? And you know these things. You just need to be reminded that this is how the game is being played. The heads of some of the largest banks in the world, except for Wells Fargo, because he just quit last week, makes total sense. You know I've been documenting Wells Fargo pretty extensively since January. Fumble after fumble. Congress Wednesday, the most significant hearing in the banking industry since Democrats took control of the House. See, who is the good guy? Well, how is this being framed? Not Congress, Democrats, right? So they need this piece. ABC News is a piece of the beast, so they need this piece. New York Times, Washington Post, they're all pro-Democrat, deep state, whatever you want to call them. They're again, all playing for the same team. The biggest thing I wanted to point out here is that Jamie Dimon, I've been researching him quite a bit, and he, I think, is the front runner to take over the IMF chair position or the Fed chair position. And I think he'll take the Fed chair. He's been at Chase 10 years. He was one of the guys who was in the meetings in the last economic crisis. Remember, JP Morgan picked up the sweet short Bear Stearns silver position that they're still running to this day. They're running active manipulation and suppression on the gold and silver markets, an open investigation by the FBI and DOJ against Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan right now. But you got to understand something. They can't take him down. He's in all the meetings. So on one hand, they're trying to like play hardball with this guy as if they're separate entities to keep this facade up. But they're on the same team. They're having meetings. They're, meeting with the president. They're meeting with different, Congress and bodies of three-letter agencies in the United States to help drive growth, to help drive GDP. So the FBI, it'll be interesting to see if the FBI and DOJ can actually research this guy, because they're going to take down JP Morgan, the largest bank in the world. Wouldn't that lead to an economic crisis? Wouldn't that lead to a possible recession? How can they do that? So it's safe to assume that they won't. Okay, or they'll stop it. Like, they'll let all the shit hit the fan, and then they'll stop it right before it's about to break down the big guys, right before it's about to break down the big dogs. And this is just part of the game, I guess. Okay, so the big things that were echoed was that there was this new strength, stability, and resiliency. Good word usage there, right? Strength, stability, resiliency of the financial system, which has been improved over the last 10 years, but it hasn't. Okay, what they've done is they've further pushed out the debt so that it's in more countries now. There's no one point of failure that can be pointed at as the reason why it's all going to crumble. China's doing the same thing. They're printing off tons of money and using that to buy up real assets like gold and land and take over different utilities in countries all throughout Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, so that they're owning the good stuff while they're purging and pushing out the bad stuff, which is the fiat currency. I think it's hilarious that Maxine Waters is the chair of Financial Services Committee. She has a lot of dirty money in her personal life. You can look this up for yourself. She owns a couple of really big houses on her current pay. That shouldn't be possible. Her husband's involved. They're all involved in nonprofits which get funding coincidentally from all these different places, and then they're passing these bills which support these other places. It's very 2D and easy to see if you have the patience to dig deep enough. And again, that's just presenting fact for what it is, right? I don't really have a personal opinion of these people because they're all pretty much the same. They're playing the rat wheel game. They're playing the consumerism game. The cogs must continue to grind. GDP must continue to grow. The insanity must continue to go on. They're all playing that game. They all believe that that's truth, that that's reality. So she attempted to grill, and so did Cortez, of course. And so, again, that tells you what should be the key dead giveaways is how deep they go. Now, this lasted 7 hours, by the way, so that's pretty long. But if somebody was really after truth, don't you think that they wouldn't give up? And it would just keep going in on a topic and talking, right? And if it was a public thing where you really wanted to make somebody look bad, wouldn't you just keep going on and on and on and on, deeper and deeper and deeper, ask for more and more explanation, ask the same question many, many times in different ways? That's how real investigations are actually done, right? Like if you look at how the police do things, if you look at how somebody who's trying to get down to the truth does things, they keep asking the same question over and over and over again to hear the response. And then based on the responses, they start to piece together the truth. We all know that's the actual way to get to the truth. But yet, when they do these hearings, it's just a show. It's just a show, all right? So anyways, you can read this if you want. It's just just crap. Okay, here's another piece I found. Again, don't assume that I like or support Jim Rickards or Peter Schiff because I'm presenting data that they showed. But buybacks, this just proves that buybacks have been on the rise, and that corporations have shown quite a bit of data that corporations are actually the ones in charge of a lot of the stock buys right now. Okay, let me show you this other image really quick. I'm saving some data that I want to break down in a slightly different way with you. Here's according to Goldman as well, corporations are the largest source of equity demand. So they're the largest buyers of stocks right now. So regular people are selling stocks, they're the ones buying. Then there's buybacks, and that's on the rise as well. This last piece that I want to show before we pivot, what a shocker. All the CEOs of the bailed out banks testifying before Congress don't want to end the Fed or return to a gold standard. Under a gold standard, no future bank bailouts are possible. That's not necessarily true. The Fed protects bankers from suffering the market consequences of their mistakes. I like the overall ethos of this. I don't like the points brought up. Okay, first off, Peter Schiff was involved in the bailout, so you can't pretend to be a hero when you were part of the problem. And that's why he kind of plays this position. And his position has been the same since the very beginning, is that gold is the answer, gold is the answer, gold is the answer. Now, if you would have been holding on and in the market and listening to him since the very beginning, you would have missed out on a lot of gains by just sitting on gold. That's where I'll leave that. We can come back to that conversation at another time. But I will agree with the fact that it's in the Fed's best interest to continue to defend the insanity versus look at a different way of doing things. And it's because the Fed at a small level, I think, is involved in the decision making with the IMF and ABIS, but they're the ones really making the rule book. And I think they've already got a plan in place. And I've got another really deep video I'm probably going to shoot on that and bring all that together. I've got all the IMF pieces and this whole dual currency and negative interest rates. I dug deeper and found some stuff all the way back to 2016 when Yellen was saying that in the next economic recession they will go negative interest rates. We've got now recent talks with the dual currency bail-in options. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see where that's going to go. And where I want to leave this is a recent conversation with Lagarde, which is cryptocurrencies are clearly shaking the system. She literally said shaking the system. Distributed ledger technologies like crypto and digital assets are shaking the system. So this is just another breadcrumb that, one, they're admitting that this is a disruptor. They're admitting that it's literally now shaken the foundation, and it will be a reason why they integrate it. So now they have to come out and pepper out all the little sound bites and talking pieces about how they think that there's a place now for distributed ledger technology and blockchain. And that will be the excuse and the reason why they do what they do next, which is either going to be G20 level backed digital assets, or there's going to be one. You know, there's a couple different baskets to pay attention to. We've got the SDR, which is literally a basket of currencies piece, and where that's kind of moving. We've got the negative interest piece, which is going to happen regardless. And what seems to be the driving conversation around that is, and how to make that work, is having some sort of dual currency system, which the distributed ledger technology and blockchain technology, you cannot deny that, because they want more transparency, not more privacy. They want to stop the money laundering. They want to stop the money under your mattress, and they want you to pay for all that with the tax man. As that tightens up around the world, that is the solution for that, is because while it is anonymous, it only is anonymous until you footprint who owns the address, and then it's completely obvious and easy to see, and it is for everyone to see, and it never goes away, and you can't hide it. Okay, so that is the downside to everything with distributed ledger technology. And we could even go deeper and say it was a huge coincidence that Bitcoin itself was created on the backside of the last financial crisis, and that some of the system involving it was originally created by different three-letter agencies. And we've got the 1988 Economist article and all the connections to Bitcoin and this anonymous creator, right? I've covered that in separate videos on the channel. But I think those breadcrumbs are starting to really come home to roost, and the future is being laid out right in front of us on where they want to go. I really do see a future where it's like a Star Wars with the credits, and they are international credits, interplanetary credits, because think about where we're at right now. How are we going to start to colonize space? How are you going to be on a moon or an asteroid belt, mining different minerals and material, and then sell that and get credits? How's that going to work? There needs to be some sort of literally interplanetary system. I think that distributed ledger technology and blockchain is the next step. Cryptocurrencies, I don't think that what we've got right now will be the final thing, but there will be out of this the birth of the next thing, which becomes that. Okay, could be Ripple, could be something that they haven't even rolled out yet. It could be something that they're working on that they want to roll out. I don't know about that, but that's where I want to leave the conversation. And all this, the most important thing to take away here is a few things. Is one, you got to understand that a lot of this stuff is a game, and it's really hard for most people to see because they're too emotionally invested in their positions, how they feel, how they believe. They've been defending that for so long that they think they have to keep defending it, and that gets them into trouble with seeing the world in a different way, with seeing a different perspective. But if you can surrender to all that, if you can just look at data for data's sake, just like an AI would or completely unempathetic person would, you can start to footprint some interesting things together. And over time, that can actually validate itself as a fact and as a truth. And the second thing I think most people are failing to do right now is to make a plan. Things tend to run in cycles. Everything runs based off of emotion, emotional cycles of people. The reptilian brain still drives every single one of us, and it does so for a reason. When you understand psychology and you understand the way markets work in that sense, then you understand a lot of what's going to happen in the future, and you can make decisions based on that best support what you want and the level of sovereignty that you want. And that's how you get ahead. But most people are not getting ahead right now because they're down in the mud, flinging it at each other. And if you can just step back from that and start to really focus on what's most important, which is you, and making sure that you are okay through whatever happens next, and you set up a portfolio that can weather any storm, that is what's most important right now. Okay, my friends, that's all I got for you. If you like this video, click the like button. If this is your first time coming here, this is what we do. This is what we talk about. All the macroeconomic pieces. We do talk cryptocurrency, talk money, personal finance, all the good stuff. Then go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so that you don't miss out. And you can also check out the community tab on our channel. I'm posting imagery and polls and stuff like that on there all the time. If you got something to say, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. Be on the lookout. More videos dropping soon, my friends. Bye.